I mean, I want you to picture a scene for just a second. You are standing in a room, and it is, well, it is just entirely too much.
Right, the classic sensory overload scenario.
Exactly. The lights are hitting your eyes like actual physical pressure, you know. The background hum of the refrigerator sounds like a literal jet engine.
And the tags on your shirt probably feel like they're made of steel wool.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And maybe the smell of someone's lunch from down the hall is just overpowering everything else. If you have any familiarity with sensory overload, this is probably the image that pops into your head.
Yeah, physical space that is just violently overwhelming.
Right. It seems pretty straightforward, honestly. Like, it's just an environment problem. You know, the room is the issue.
And that's really the universally accepted framing we see everywhere. The room is too loud, the lights are too bright, the shirt is wrong.
That's all about the physical stuff.
Exactly. The focus is entirely on the physical territory, and all the sensory inputs just pouring out of it.
Well, today's deep dive is going to look at a perspective that completely challenges that standard framing. We are exploring a piece of writing by Dr. Jaime Hoerricks,
Titled, "The First Autistic Person Epilogue, Waiting for Time to Return."
Yeah, and Dr. Hoerricks makes this argument that just completely changes the geometry of how we understand this whole experience. The premise is that sensory overload isn't just about the physical space you are occupying.
Right.
It is actually a complete and total collapse of time.
Which is such a massive shift in thinking. It forces us to look past those immediate physical symptoms we were just talking about.
It really does.
The goal for us today is to understand what Dr. Hoerricks calls the temporal collapse, the collapse occurring within the autistic nervous system during these events.
Because grasping this, I mean, it changes everything. It changes how we view distress, recovery, and even something as basic as asking for help.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's unpack this because it really shifts the paradigm.
Yeah.
We usually think of sensory overload as like a container overflowing with water.
Right, you pour too much sensory input into the cup.
Yeah, and eventually it just spills over onto the floor. But Dr. Hoerricks suggests it's actually more like the clock on the wall suddenly shattering.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
It's not simply the volume of the water, right? It is the fundamental measurement of reality breaking down.
And to understand how that clock shatters, we kind of have to transition away from looking at the physical room. We have to start looking at the internal pacing of the brain.
Okay, so moving from the room to the internal clock.
Exactly. Dr. Hoerricks draws a line between what we can call clock time and body time.
Clock time being like the normal time.
Right. Clock time is that neat, external, predictable sequence that the rest of the world is operating on.
The shared reality, basically. An event begins, it happens, and then it ends.
Yes.
Like you go to the grocery store, you walk the aisles, you pay, you leave. Or you attend a work meeting, discuss the agenda, and the meeting adjourns. It is entirely legible to anyone observing it from the outside.
But body time, however, is a very localized metric. Body time is the actual time it takes for a sensory signal to arrive and be processed in the nervous system.
Oh, I see.
It's the time it takes for speech to fail when the cognitive load gets too heavy. Or, as Dr. Hoerricks puts it, the time it takes for yesterday to finish inside the nervous system.
Oh, hold on. I'm struggling a bit with that phrasing. The time it takes for yesterday to finish.
It's a powerful concept.
Are we just talking about basic physical fatigue here, like feeling super tired the morning after a really long, stressful day? Or is the brain, like, literally still processing yesterday's sensory data?
It is much deeper than standard fatigue. You really have to think of it as a neurological backlog.
A backlog, okay.
Yeah. In clock time, yesterday's crowded subway ride is over. It ended at 5 in the afternoon. But in body time, the nervous system is still actively managing the physiological spike created by all the noise, the crowding, the friction of that ride.
Wow.
The processing hasn't concluded at all. The body hasn't closed the file on that event.
So the body is carrying an unfinished yesterday into today's environment. That actually makes a lot of sense, and it brings up a huge question about self-advocacy for me.
Right, because of how it looks from the outside.
Exactly. When someone is visibly in distress from sensory overload, people on the outside always wonder, well, why didn't you just leave the room?
Or why didn't you just ask for a break?
Yeah. From the perspective of clock time, it seems so incredibly simple. You get overwhelmed, so you walk out. You get bothered by the noise, you grab your earplugs, or, as the text mentions, you put on the loops.
And it seems simple because observers are watching those actions exist in ordinary time. They just assume a logical, linear sequence is available to the person in distress.
Right. First A, then B, then C.
But the reality Dr. Hoerricks points out is that inside sensory overload, The temporal scaffolding required to actually perform those actions has failed entirely.
The temporal scaffolding. I mean, the phrase used in the text for this is that actions become islands without bridges, which is just such a vivid way to put it.
It really is.
Let me try an analogy here. If normal, everyday functioning is like driving your car across a continuous, smoothly paved bridge, sensory overload is like the road itself suddenly dissolving into thin air.
That's a perfect way to visualize it.
You know exactly where you want to go.
Right.
You want to get to the other side where your earplugs are or where the exit door is. You can see the island.
You know what you need to do?
Yes, but you literally cannot sequence the physical and cognitive steps to drive your car there.
What's fascinating here is the mechanics of that failure. We take for granted how much our basic survival actions rely on access to a timeline.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, explanation requires time. Planning the steps to stand up and walk to a door requires time.
oh, sure.
Even the simple act of remembering that you've survived a similar overwhelming feeling in the past, pulling a memory from yesterday to calm yourself down today, that requires a bridge to the past.
So to advocate for yourself, a request has to move from the initial sensation to recognizing what that sensation actually is, to formulating language, and finally to physically speaking the words out loud.
Yes. And every single one of those steps depends on internal temporal continuity. When the sensory field overwhelms the processor, the ability to sequence those survival actions just vanishes.
It's just gone.
Completely. The person cannot hold on to the concept of the future long enough to make a choice that will get them there.
Man, if the bridges to the future are gone and you can't reach back into the past to remind yourself that you'll be okay, you are essentially marooned.
Exactly. The mind is forced entirely into the present moment. The mona swells up and becomes the entirety of reality.
Okay, I actually have to jump in right here because living in the now is like the holy grail of every mindfulness and meditation podcast out there.
Right.
If you're listening to this, you've probably been told 100 times to stay present and focus on the now. Wait, isn't living in the now exactly what all those guides tell you to do? Why is this version of the present suddenly a catastrophe?
That is such an important question. Dr. Hoerricks makes a very sharp distinction here. This is not the mystical or therapeutic present.
Okay.
This is not the mindfulness exercise where you gently arrive in your body, take a deep breath, and observe your thoughts passing by like clouds.
So you aren't finding your center.
No, not at all. You are trapped. It is a present without an exit. It's the piercing sound occurring now, the blinding light burning now,
The nausea hitting now.
the room whitening out now, the feeling of your voice disappearing now. There is no relief coming because the very concept of later requires a functioning timeline, and that timeline has collapsed.
Because without later, there is literally no hope that the sound will stop.
Exactly. The cognitive padding that makes discomfort bearable is the knowledge that it will eventually end. When that goes away, the future self becomes completely inaccessible.
And that leads into something I found truly profound in this deep dive, the connection between time and desire.
Yes, this is a crucial part of the piece.
The relationship between having a timeline and simply wanting something.
Because desire fundamentally requires continuity.
Yeah.
You cannot want something if you cannot project yourself forward in time to receive it.
Let's think about a really ordinary scenario for a second.
Yeah.
Say you want to go to the mall to buy a new jacket, or you want to participate at a brainstorming meeting at work.
Sure.
To actually want those things, you have to believe in a future version of yourself who can navigate that experience and survive it intact.
Right.
You have to be able to imagine the version of you that goes to the loud, crowded mall, buys the jacket, comes home tired but fundamentally okay, and then just carries the day as a neutral memory.
You need that future self to aim for.
Exactly. But if overload breaks your access to that future self, you can't complete the equation of desire.
And the tragedy here is that the desire itself doesn't always vanish. The wanting survives, but the timeline breaks around it. The body becomes trapped in anticipating the physical cost before the desired outcome can even materialize in the mind.
I can see exactly how that looks from the outside, and it is a recipe for massive misunderstanding.
Oh, completely.
I mean, if I'm watching a friend or a colleague experience this collapse, like they withdraw, they shut down, maybe they cancel plans at the last possible second,
Yeah.
my neurotypical brain is going to draw the most obvious surface-level conclusion.
You're going to think they just didn't care.
Right. I'm going to think, oh, they just changed their mind. They didn't really want to go.
Right.
Or worse, I might think, They aren't even trying.
Do not go. Do
Yeah.
not want it. Do not try again. Those are the narratives projected onto the person.
Yeah.
But the wanting was real. The person wanted to participate in the meeting. They wanted to go to the dinner. The shutdown wasn't a lack of desire. It was a structural failure of time preventing them from reaching the event.
That is heartbreaking.
Having the people around you falsely assume you simply didn't care enough to try is really one of the most isolating aspects of this entire experience.
If you're listening and trying to map this onto your own interactions, just think about how often we judge someone's motivation based purely on their ability to execute a sequence of actions.
We constantly do that.
We conflate the shattered bridge with a lack of destination. So, if the brain is stuck in this trapped present during the event, what happens when the clock says the meeting is finally over?
When the physical event ends.
Right. The pizza boxes are cleared away, the loud music at the restaurant is turned off. Does the brain just snap back?
Well, the external world certainly assumes it does. Once the physical trigger is removed, society expects a hard reset.
Because to everyone else, the event is over.
Exactly. To everyone else, the difficult event has already become an anecdote, something safely in the past. But the body keeps a very different record. Dr. Hoerricks refers to this as temporal dislocation.
Temporal dislocation.
The physical body is still inside the event's weather.
Oh, like a sensory hangover.
It includes elements of a hangover, fatigue, reduced executive function, but it's actually more active than that. It's the neurological reality that yesterday is still happening in your body, even while it feels completely unreachable and gone from the perspective of everyone else in the room.
That completely upends how we typically handle recovery.
It really does.
Because the outside world expects recovery to follow a highly legible, logical schedule.
Yeah.
You left the noisy room, you went home, you slept for 8 hours. Therefore, your body and your voice should be fully operational by breakfast.
We expect people to return to the exact same baseline person they were before the event started.
Right.
But the concept of a baseline is often just a fiction designed to comfort outsiders.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it makes the people around the autistic person feel like the damage was temporary, contained, and easily fixed by simply changing the room. But recovery from a temporal collapse is not a straight road.
Not at all.
It is entirely nonlinear. It circles back on itself. It stalls. It might return one function to you, but withhold another entirely.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because
Okay.
I think a tech analogy perfectly captures the danger of this uneven recovery.
Okay, let's hear it.
Think about when your computer completely freezes up and you force a hard reboot. The screen turns back on. The desktop wallpaper loads. The mouse pointer appears.
Right.
And to anyone walking by your desk, it looks like the computer's completely fixed. But if you try to open a program or type on the keyboard, nothing happens. The internal processor is still completely choked.
That is a brilliant analogy. That gap between outward appearance and internal processing is exactly what Dr. Hoerricks identifies as getting back the face before the inside has arrived.
The face before the inside has arrived. Time has returned just enough to give the person back a socially acceptable, quote-unquote, fine expression.
Yes.
But they haven't gotten back their tolerance for noise or their ability to make decisions or their capacity for complex speech, which just makes them incredibly vulnerable.
Highly vulnerable.
Because people look at that loaded desktop wallpaper and say, oh, you're fine now. Let's get back to work. And they start piling on demands again while the processor's still frozen.
And that vulnerability comes from being misread by a culture that only measures clock time. As the text emphasizes, true recovery isn't waiting for normal time to return. It is waiting for mine.
The autistic person's own internal time.
Waiting for the internal clock to reassemble. The time where sensory signals finally arrive with enough distance around them to actually be sorted and understood.
Yeah.
The time where a physical need can become language before it turns into an absolute emergency. It's waiting for the moment where yesterday finally stops being an unfinished room inside the nervous system.
Wow. If the body keeps such a profound, lingering record of this timeline collapse, if this is the core architecture of the experience, why didn't I read about this in any psychology textbook?
It's a glaring omission.
I mean, if this temporal collapse is the defining feature of the experience, why is it completely missing from the clinical language? You open up the standard diagnostic manuals, the DSM, and how is sensory overload described?
The criteria in those manuals are based almost entirely on external observations, the things that inconvenience or are visible to outsiders. Right.
You see gestures toward hyperreactivity or hyporeactivity, aversion to specific textures, unusual responses to sensory input.
They are just measuring the water spilling out of the cup onto the floor.
Exactly. They document the visible distress, but they do not say the present may become completely sealed.
Yeah.
The manuals do not mention that past learning becomes entirely inaccessible under a heavy sensory load. They don't outline how future planning collapses or that recovery is this incredibly precarious, uneven return of temporal continuity.
It just misses the whole internal reality.
The clinical language misses the inner reality of the experience because it refuses to measure time differently than the dominant culture does.
It also feels like the nature of the overload inherently erases its own evidence.
What do you mean?
Well, think about the mechanics of it. In the exact moment the temporal collapse is happening, it steals your speech. You literally cannot explain the phenomenon while you are trapped inside it.
That's very true. And by the time your internal timeline recovers enough for you to articulate what just happened, the world has already moved on.
Because the social record has already hardened into a very simple, digestible narrative. She was fine, then she had a moment, then it was over. The complexity is just smoothed over.
Which gives so much weight to why Dr. Hoerricks wrote this down in the first place. The article mentions framing this work as a temporal archive.
Yes, it acts as a record against disappearance. The body remembers the warning that didn't arrive in time.
Right.
The body remembers the light turning into physical pressure or the smell of a room occupying the cognitive space of the rest of the day. The body holds the physical cost long after the surrounding culture has simply filed the event away as a minor inconvenience.
And the culture files it away because confronting the reality of this temporal collapse would require a massive structural shift in how we build our shared spaces.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the culture refuses to count this specific type of time, to actually count it, to admit that our standard everyday environments cause this level of temporal collapse, would mean acknowledging that these spaces are actively extracting a toll.
A huge toll.
They are stealing days from people's lives. They are stealing speech. They're stealing futures by taking away a person's ability to even know what they wanted while they are still in the process of wanting it.
Wow.
Our entire civilization operates on the assumption that everyone can carry time the exact same way through noise, light, touch, and spatial demands.
If you're listening to this right now, this fundamentally alters what it means to create an accessible world.
It really does.
True accessibility cannot just be about rescue operations. It's not just about waiting for the collapse and then dimming the lights or letting someone leave the room once they are already in crisis. Real access has to mean keeping time open in the first place.
Keeping the bore available so a person can draw on their past resilience, and keeping the after imaginable so they can maintain their desires. It means designing environments and setting social expectations so that the present moment doesn't suddenly become a sealed room with no exits.
I want you to hold on to a specific warning from Dr. Hoerricks as you go about your week. Do not mistake delivered language for absence of truth.
Such a powerful line.
Do not mistake survival for access. And do not mistake recovery for return. I want you to look differently at the so-called ordinary environments that you probably navigate effortlessly every single day. The grocery store aisles, the open plan office with the humming fluorescent lights, the crowded echoing classroom.
Recognizing this framework reframes the human experience happening right next to us. It forces us to see the invisible effort required just to stay on the shared timeline.
It does. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. If our entire civilization builds ordinary life on the invisible, unquestioned assumption that every human brain keeps that clock ticking in the exact same way, how many unseen timelines are quietly collapsing right next to you at this very moment?
The person standing perfectly still in the aisle, the colleague staring at their screen, who looks fine but hasn't typed a word in an hour. And what could happen? What kind of world could we actually build if we finally slow down enough to let those different timelines catch up? The clock isn't just ticking. For some people, it's shattering. Thanks for diving deep with us today.